said you took it on the chin.
Microphones on, please.
You have lost that toothpaste grin.
Good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time you woke up today.
My mental state
After your Super Bowl
is
hangovers and everything, now we're back to work, planning a recreational park. It's a great time for Sausalito, as you saw the fence around Sweeney, and we're moving forth on some of these action items that we've been planning for the last year plus, and this is another stage. So we are the Planning Commission. We're going to take a roll call. I mean, we just elevate ourselves to the Planning Commission. We're the Parks and Rec Commission, and as City Council, we'll be determining. So we're the Parks and Rec Commission. We normally have another person on our commission here, our chair, Doreen Gennard, who has recused herself due to adjacent conflict with the property in question that we're talking about tonight. But for now, we'll take roll with the three of us.
Cindy Powers.
Joe Burns.
Sela Seleska.
And again, this is kind of a part three in a way of the discussions that we had two prior that were community forum presented by council for the Parks and Rec Commission to host, which were to talk about the schematic master plan for Dunphy Park. Those were January 19th and 27th, where friends of the park through Jacques Ullman presented where we had come to date, and that history was provided, and we'll touch on a little bit on that tonight. We listened to the community. We withheld kind of our comments waiting for this type of meeting where we will now again listen to the community and then discourse a little bit to come to a recommendation back to council. We're going to start the night with our normal Brown Act procedure of first we'll do approval of the agenda with the commission. Take a motion.
I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We open up the meeting for communications on anything not on the agenda, which is the Dunphy Park Schematic Master Plan. Is there anybody that'd like to make a comment to an item not on tonight's agenda? Please come up. State your name and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Mary Draxel at 22 Casno, and we have a Casno Park. It's a pocket park, and not much has been done lately about it, and I was wondering if there was a master plan, or what are the plans for that park? Is it a situation where we need to get an ad hoc group of neighbors to kind of make it usable? And what guidelines would we need to do that? So those are my questions.
Great. Thank you. And as part of public comment, we can't answer or comment or discuss your comment, but I would definitely encourage you to talk to staff and direct us to come back with an item maybe on our next agenda or go forth from there. That's perfect. Thank you. Anything else? Not seeing anything. We'll close public comment. Open up item D of the Parks and Rec Commission meeting, and I'll invite Jacques Ullman to represent Friends of the Park to bring us up to speed on this meeting.
Actually, Commissioner Burns, if I could do a little bit of a history here, just so that we know where we are before Jacques does his present. Just want to bring everybody up to speed. In 2013, the City Council ranked the need for a schematic master plan for Dunphy Park 5th on the fiscal year 2014 priority calendar. Then on November 16th, 2013, with the assistance of a professional neutral facilitator, a public forum was held to gather input for the plan. That was held at the Bay Model, and the attendance was roughly about 100 people there. On November 10th, 2015, the Friends presented this plan to the City Council. Council directed the Parks and Recreation Commission to hold 2 well-publicized meetings where the Friends could present the plan to the public and gather further input. Council's direction also recommended that the plans be adjusted accordingly based on community input, and then that the final plans be brought back to council for their approval before going any further.
Thank you, Mike. Jacques.
Okay, Jacques Ullman, Friends of Dunphy Park. I want to first clarify that some people don't understand that the schematic master plan is not just that one image that you see of the plan, it's this entire PowerPoint, because there are a lot of things said in the PowerPoint that support the plan, and there were some misunderstandings that came out of people not having looked through the whole PowerPoint, and so I just want to make it clear that that's what the City Council will be reviewing, is the entire PowerPoint. That is the plan. So, for instance, knowing about the adjoining ownerships and the things we say about that, it's important. That's part of the plan. And all I want to do, I'm not going to go through the whole PowerPoint, is just make some clarifications and then a few changes. Because in fairness to you, if you send something on to the City Council, this PowerPoint has today's date on it, and I'm going to make clear to you any differences between this and what you saw before. There are only 3 slides that are affected. This is one of them. The only thing we changed on this was to blacken out the areas within the park. Yeah, thank you, Mike. To make very clear, because it seems some people didn't understand this, that those areas that are blackened out along the railroad right-of-way and in the southern part of the park, that's the property that was purchased in '03 and added to the park. So the portion that's south of Litho Street is currently a sort of a corporation yard that the city uses, but that is to be part of the park. And it also needs to be made clear that this property was actually purchased as a result of money that came from the Coastal Conservancy. And it's federal money, I believe, at the origin that filters through the state and through the Coastal Conservancy. And there's quite a process you have to go through to get these funds. There's a punch list of conditions that have to be satisfied. And I have a stack of files on the history of this, which people are interested could go through. But I think it's important to be aware of the fact that in those documents you often have stated things like enhancement of public access to the bay, preservation and enhancement of open space. These are direct quotes out of the conditions and all the punch lists. Appreciation of natural environment, maintain natural condition of the shoreline. So also BCDC reviewed another plan back in '01, and they made certain plan for Dunphy Park that was never realized, and they made comments like limiting parking, shoreline preservation, separating bicycles from pedestrians, having unobstructed view of the bay, no bridge across the Litho Street slough, continuous trail along the waterfront, and to avoid concrete at the pedestrian path. So these were guidelines when we, Friends of Dunphy Park, started to work on a general a schematic plan. We were aware of this, and these were guidelines that we followed in our plan. So if you approve or recommend something to the City Council that is not consistent with this, I want you to be aware that there could be conflicts and there could be trouble, because there have been suggestions for things to happen in that area that was purchased that are uses that are not compatible with the reasons that we got the funding. So you need to understand that, because it could be serious if we violate that. So the only other place where there is a change is relative to the shoreline path. There was a lot of concern on the part of the people who have been working on the north-south greenway that we not conflict with it. So I'm sorry, I'm not talking about the shoreline path, this one. But we had to first show a solution that would work with the current path, because the north-south greenway requires funding, which we don't have yet and is not part of our budget for Dunphy Park. So in this slide, we simply want to show how we're going to interface with existing conditions. But we did not intend to conflict with this study or this path. And so I did add a note here that says, so this is a difference between what you viewed before. The note says the following will be consulted before commencing working drawings for park improvements: the Sausalito Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Transportation Alternatives for Marin, and the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. Now, I understand that there's some issue about the corner at Bridgeway and Napa Street. Now, we follow the guidelines of the Public Works Director. There is a large power pole there, which constricts the path at that point. And the Public Works Director has some issues about where you bring the bicycles across. And so we were kind of caught in a situation where we had to follow the Public Works Director's lead, and we show what we show. However, this plan can move ahead, and these issues can be dealt with in the future. Just as I will say later, all the issues for the water-based activities need to be part of another forum with people who know more about boats and who know more about marine habitat, all the eelgrass issues, and also all the recreational needs for small boats that we may be trying to satisfy. That's not part of this schematic master plan. Will work no matter what is worked out in that area. So in the same case for this, that we believe that we're setting it up so that there will be no conflict with the north-south path. Nothing's changed in all this till we get to the very last sheet. All right. So here in the references, we simply added one reference to articles that were received from Terry Thomas, who's the director of the Conservation Stewardship and Research at Presidio Trust. And so we're trying to get more and more information on the marine habitat issues, because that's been brought up quite a bit in the hearings. And then the second paragraph down with the guidelines for the future, we added some, because this is a response to people's issues about parking. Some public parking serving the southern portion of the park should be considered at Humboldt Street near Locust, along with a small secondary toilet facility. So if I can operate this. Yeah, so that's Humboldt Street, and there was parking here, and so we're simply mentioning that in all the negotiations that the city does with Bridgeway Marina or any other situation, that they should consider reserving some area in here for at least daytime parking, could be shared with nighttime parking for other uses, for use of the park. And that would achieve some of that need that was expressed to have parking more distributed, because we still strongly feel that this area here should not be violated by parking. So we're trying to maybe alleviate the situation by suggesting some parking on this end. And we did include in these notes before that a toilet facility be considered on that end, but people didn't catch that because this was obviously not the sheet that was concentrated on. So I just want to just briefly talk about the drive-on lawns that have been suggested, just to give you some technical advice about that. I mean, there are various systems that are used with concrete blocks, or more likely probably would be a high-density polyethylene system that comes in large sheets or rolls and then has little holes, and you can put sand in and you can seed grass. But in order for that to work, you've got to have a substrate. So you'd have to excavate the area, and you'd have to put in the proper substrate. And then, of course, most importantly, that area has to be basically fairly level. So that whole swatch there would be level. And furthermore, to achieve, there's no sense doing it at all if you don't do a double-loaded parking area, because you want to at least use the area efficiently. And that would require encroaching 5 more feet on Dunphy Park than the current railroad right-of-way. And then, you know, it's easy to say, let's grass it over with this material, but there are a lot of things that go along with it. Aside from being level, you've got to have some kind of edging. If you don't edge it with some sort of a bond beam or a curb, then it'll fall apart on the edges. And then if you're going to park the cars, you're going to have to identify where the cars are to park, so you have to put some markers there. And then you don't want the cars to wander into the park, so you're going to have some kind of a bumper, some kind of a curb, some way, as in you always do in parking lots. And so the net result of all this is that you're going to really identify that area. It's not going to have that nice green feeling, and all of these markers and bumpers people are going to trip on. It's going to be a severe liability for the city. And then the cars running over this are going to leave their marks. You're going to have oil drippings. And that lawn, even if it's the same kind of seed, is never going to grow to look like the rest of the lawn. So no matter what you do, it's going to be identified as a rectilinear shape, interfering with the whole concept of going to compromise really the plan's effort to enhance public access. Again, that's the idea, to the bay, and the natural feeling, and also parking obviously blocks views, and it would we would not be able to extend the contoured lawn area to the sidewalk. And then for trees, well, you could plant trees in this stuff, but then if you start planting trees there, then as a parking area, it's less efficient, so then you're not even parking a reasonable number of cars, and you're giving up a great deal of the plan. So just keep all those things in consideration so we don't lose the natural fluid contoured aspects of the plan.
That's it? I mean, not that's it, but.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take you through it. You've been through it before.
Thanks, Jock. So we are going to open up another round of public comment. And I see that people have provided cards, and there's a lot of them. If you have another one you want to bring up, that would be wonderful. You know, it's a good opportunity and a right and a duty to speak your mind. We've heard a lot, so, you know, if you want to kind of just curtail some of the stuff that we've gone over and over, but we have new information. We have information I think that needed to be vetted further, and at some points that some groups want to continue to make, and that's good, and that's what we want to do. We'll be taking as many notes as possible and address as many of these as possible as we can do tonight, and so that we can hopefully leave this meeting with an understanding of hearing from you and kind of deliberating and hearing what we're thinking. So we will open it up. You have Mike, we'll run the clock. You'll have 3 minutes, so listen for your little beep. Oh, okay. So turned upside down. Yeah, thank you. I'll run off 3 names here if you want to get prepared in order. And I know a lot of people like to say I don't like to use the mic, but we are recorded tonight, and a lot of these comments we're hoping both the Planning Commission and City Council will be listening to, as well as the public, for recordation. Please do speak into the mic, even if you have a big boisterous voice and That'd be wonderful. First up, Sherwin Smith. Second up, Mary Droon, sorry, and Elizabeth Torplin. Yeah, that, or, I'm sorry, Sherwin Smith.
Okay.
But if you guys want to choose, that's fine.
Okay. So, good evening to you all. I have sent an email to you all. Cindy, I'm sorry I didn't realize you were on the commission. I went by the website, so don't be offended, please. But at the risk of repeating myself, I'm just going to read it now because I think it's worth hearing, perhaps, or germane to the situation. So, what I said was, I attended the January 19th forum on the schematic master plan, and I want to actually say again, thank you so much for the great job of publicizing the meeting. It was very clear that this was something that I would be interested in, and I heard about it in a number of different ways, so well done on that part. I commented at that meeting, and after reading the draft minutes, wanted to send a quick clarification correction. On page 7 of the minutes, my comment is titled, New Addition to the Plan to Consider, Rowing Club. However, I didn't intend that comment as a requested addition to the Dunphy Park Master Plan, but rather as a comment on something that could possibly be considered in future planning for the area to the south of Dunphy Park. If possible, I'd appreciate the draft minutes be corrected to replace new addition to the plan to consider Rowing Club with consideration for future planning for adjacent waterfront rowing center. As the founder of the 31-year-old rowing center on Sausalito's northern waterfront, which is Open Water Rowing Center, I've long hoped that a sustainable long-term home can be found for an entity that has connected so many hundreds of Sausalito residents to the health benefits of rowing and the wonders of our bay. Community rowing organizations grace the shores of so many towns and cities around the country. Sausalito is equally well suited to have the same. Thank you for considering my comments.
Thank you. Mary, is Mary still here? That was your comment prior on the Casno, right?
Yeah,
so you're good? Thank you. Elizabeth.
Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Turplin. I have two main points to make to all of you. First, I really want to thank Paul Leffingwell, Jacques Ullman, and the Friends of Dunphy Park Committee have really created an excellent plan for a remodel of Sausalito's community-centered park. They've done this painstaking work over several years with the goal of what is best for our town and without any remuneration. For that alone, I think we owe them immense gratitude. They're outstanding, well-respected talents in the Bay Area, and here they are doing this for us in Sausalito. But even more, we must acknowledge their visionary design, a plan that serves the various needs that Dunphy Park demands, yet it minimizes parking. Sausalito already has an excess of waterfront parking with its several parking lots in the downtown area, places that should be focused on something other than automobiles. To add more parking spaces in this remodel would be against the fundamental purpose of a park, which is to get us out of our cars. It would also be taking a step backward against intelligent city planning. Many cities all over the country are finally agreeing that too many cars destroy downtowns. And let us be part of that movement. Let us accommodate ourselves to a less automobile-centered city. Please strongly consider adopting the Leffingwell-Ullman plan and not increasing the parking. Thank you.
Nancy Osborne, Riley Hurd, and Christine Scarpino. In that order, or an order you determine through Rochambeau.
Members of the Planning Commission, I'm Nancy Osborne. I live on Kendall Court, have for 35 years, and have enjoyed Dunphy Park. I've also one of the Friends of Dunphy Park for a number of years. And I want to talk about the positive things that have been accomplished and have to move forward, or we're just going to lose such a treasure. First of all, think of all the detail that Jacques just a change from last week, some of the details they've dealt with. They've dealt with ADA rules. They've dealt with eelgrass, the Bay Commission's that purchase and what restrictions that puts on it by actually that we would be penalized by using that railroad strip for parking. Just by the fact that they had to accommodate a residential area, a waterfront residential area, a cruising club, a private club called the Cruising Club, another area which would be I can't think of the name of the facility. Cass Marina, sorry. That had to be accommodated. Then all these groups that want activities, the bocce courts, the volleyball, the people then who want just some area that's there to play in, to let their kids be able to play, maybe just throw frisbees. But then you have another group who want really just passive areas. They don't want to come and have to be interrupted by a lot of activity. And aren't we fortunate that they were able to actually have an area where you can go quietly picnic or just enjoy the beauty that we have. And I know the parking has become sort of like something that's almost driving this plan. I certainly support everything that Elizabeth Turplin had to say. Also, it's occurred to me, if you would actually remember how many people in this city would love it if they had at least one and possibly two parking places. You drive around this town, I look out on a strip of about 100 yards outside my home where there are 4 or 5 cars that appear every morning. The people don't live in the area. They reappear in the evening. They leave, the cars are there. They move them so they don't get tickets every 72 hours. I've seen all kinds of places where there is no parking that goes along with a home in Sausalito. They rely on city parking. And so the only one thing that I have to make before I finish is just how very fortunate we are to have had the talents of Paul Leffingwell and Jacques Ullman, 2 professionals that we would be paying so much money. They have devoted so much time to this. And I guess what I really want to say is, please don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. This is a wonderful plan, and it can be adapted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Riley?
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Riley Hurd. I'm a land use attorney, and I'm here on behalf of the Galilee Harbor group of residences. They're a low-income residential boat community right to the left of, I call it the left, but it's the west of the park. They asked me to take a look at these plans and be sure that we worked with the city in regards to this upgrade, because they are all for it and share a lot of the same support. So being a lawyer, the first thing I did was look at the code, and the code gives great guidance. It says, quote, ensure that parks and recreational uses are compatible with adjacent uses and the character of the area in which they are located. That makes sense. I then compared the plan to the code and saw that all of the active uses here were being pushed against the residential community here. And it kind of seemed like the opposite of what was being called for in the municipal code. I also noticed something else, and that is that a portion of my client's private property right here is being proposed as a parking lot. It's true there may or may not be an easement over that for access. It actually appears the easement was wiped out in a foreclosure, but that's not city land. Galilee still very much wants to accommodate the city, and they just have to be careful about how they do it because of their BCDC permit. And I'll explain. The main issue is parking. BCDC says they have to have 64 spaces. 18 of their approved spaces are right here on this lot that are now shown as park spaces. So we need to do something different to make this work, and I think it can work. Some great alternatives have been submitted. One easy solution is keeping the bocce courts where it is. The reason for that is if you put parking somehow near there, perhaps here, you can pull away some of the parking down there, not increase it, and leave what belongs to Galilee. You also have the fact that this blank parcel here is zoned commercial and slotted for development, and we have it next to a passive use wildlife area. So we need to think about kind of the interplay between those two. Final comment is really about the cruising club. I understand that's been taken off the table. We would ask that any plan you send to the council have it in its current position. Two quick issues. Trees. I understand that cutting down the trees could help some of those who live on the hill, but we think it should be about the enjoyment of the park. And finally, tonight's procedural steps. We very much implore you to amend the plan, but even if you don't, to send a detailed list to the council of what should be considered. And my client looks forward to working with the city to make this a big success. Thank you.
Thanks, Riley. Christine, and then we will go with Joe Nowitzki, Susan Huxtable, and Kaylee Adams. Kelly Adams?
Hi, everybody. Christine Scarpino, 20-year resident, Sausalito. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at this forum. As you may know, I served as the treasurer for Measure F and Measure O campaigns, believing in the necessity of upgrades for the MLK, the park properties, and city infrastructure in general. I'm also a member of Galilee Harbor Community Association, where I have lived since 2001. I also want to thank Mike and the Park and Rec Commissioners for holding all of the public forums to discuss Dunphy Park. Galilee Harbor owns approximately 7 acres to the north of Dunphy Park, or west. We have voiced our concerns about the proposed layout of the new park with the Friends of Dunphy Park, with the city, during public forums, at City Council, and with the commissioners individually. A very wise person in our harbor said that if you load a boat with all of its ballast at one end, the boat will become unbalanced and could sink. In a nutshell, we believe this of the Dunphy Park design, as we have exhaustively detailed the specifics of this in all of our meetings. Parallel to our conversation, an architect in town who I have not met personally, Nina LeBaron, had put together a schematic proposal that we believe could fit the needs for everybody both inside and outside of the park. I think the Commission has a heavy responsibility tonight to send the Council a design that has incorporated many interests and many opinions across a variety of levels. Not only are you charged with approving a park design, but you also need to be aware of how this piece fits into the larger puzzle, the harmony both within the park, access through the park, and with the adjacent uses surrounding the park. You have heard loud and clear from all parties about the need for a few really critical changes, and since this could be the last stop in the design process, please think carefully over the decisions you make tonight. Incorporating these critical comments as an addendum is of the utmost importance. Remember, Dunphy Park is a piece of the puzzle. Please be mindful of the whole puzzle. Thank you.
And this is Joe?
I'm Kelly.
Kelly, okay.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Kelly Adams. I live in Sausalito. I'm a landscape designer and a longtime rower at Open Water Rowing Center. I'm a current board member of Open Water Rowing. And I think it's incredible, both in my professional world and in my recreational world, to see the development and rework of a park. I think that water access should be a large component of the park. I've learned as a rower, and I think it applies to other water sports, is that we are stewards of the water. We take care, we love the beauty of the bay, and if you want someone else to learn that, you simply show it to them. You put them in the environment. And I think that that's an important asset of any park with so much water access. I think Dunphy Park is a community park serving the people that live here. Water access is key. How can we work together for this part of the city's waterfront? Thank you.
I'm guessing Joe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Commission. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Joe Nowitzki. I grew up in part in Sausalito, living in Hurricane Gulch with a paper route. I now live on the north end of town in Kappa's Marina. I'm a rower and also a member of the board of the Open Water Rowing Center, which is not a club. It has no bar, has no kitchen. It is a waterborne gym with no loud music. I would only like to, this evening, to congratulate a group of citizens who have done so much work at redoing and reimagining a lovely piece of open space and water access in the middle of a city like Sausalito. And I would like to urge the Commission, and through the Commission, the Council, the City Council, to consider if, to broaden the focus, and if in future other land uses adjacent to the park become possible, that some consideration be given to a low to no impact center for rowing, which would promote youth, use, and serve the communities of the young and the elderly and anyone else who can benefit from being on the bay and dealing with the challenges that come with the water and the beauty that there resides. Thank you very much.
Susan, and then we'll do Randy, Janice, and Nina.
Thank you. I'd like to think I'm speaking for the youth. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me.
The youth are hearing you.
Thank you for allowing me to talk of something I am passionate about. My name is Susan Huxtable, and I have a home in Mill Valley. I live in East Pier and now live at Kappa's Marina and have lived in Pelican Harbor. My passion is rowing on the bay, and I'd like to share that experience with the young people living here in Sausalito. Sharing through a youth rowing program on the central waterfront near Dunphy Park has a practical side. Rowing is an NCAA sport, practiced at a lot of very good colleges and universities. Well-prepared boys and girls from rowing clubs across the country can and have gotten a leg up on college admissions through rowing. If a rowing center in Sausalito enables just one high school student, do I sound like a teacher? If it enables just one high school student an opportunity for a scholarship, then the effort is worth it. If our high school students have an NCAA sport on these waters that could get them into college on scholarship, then the effort is worth it. I row at Sausalito's Open Water Rowing Center and look forward to an expansion that could change the lives of the youth in this community. That's why I'm here. Now, ERG scores on rowing machines could be as important as an SAT score. I hope the city of Sausalito's plans for the central waterfront can eventually include a facility outside of Dunphy Park that will support youth rowing on the bay waters that are part of our town. We have the opportunity to change young people's lives and would welcome your support. Thank you for hearing me, a former teacher. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy.
Hi, my name is Randy Hickson. I've been lived in the Sausalito area for about 30 plus years, and again, I'm also a member of Open Water Rowing. I've rowed there from the first day they opened, and I very much enjoyed being on the water during that time and the experiences it's brought me. I speak a little bit also to the youth in the sense that I'm also a coach at Tam High School. I coach pole vault over there, and as you can tell, I recently found out about this plan from the other folks here at Open Water, and was really happy to see how much is being included concerning waterfront activities. And I would really enjoy and hope that in the future there could be more of that in any area along Sausalito, because it'd be a fantastic thing for the kids to get into here, and would be happy to support it in any way. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Randy. Janice?
I'm Janice Bosenko, and I'm the secretary of the IDESST Sausalito Portuguese Cultural Center. And this is Diane Diaz. She's one of our directors. And our concern mostly is parking. Not that there be more parking, but that the current policy of renting the parking spaces for special events is maintained. And Diane has some key talking points in that regard.
Hi, I'm Diane. Our hall has actually been around for about 128 years, which is actually longer than the city of Sausalito. And we've been at the current location for 63 years. We're a nonprofit fraternal organization, and we've rented the Caledonia facility to the public since 1953. We understand that for decades that Sam Occasion often gave permission to the hall to park on his property where the railroad tracks were before the park was established. Once the park was built and a private rentable lot became available, the center and its renters have rented that lot, which can accommodate up to 70 cars. We understand with the new plans that this critical long-term parking area will be completely eliminated. The nearest parking lot is several blocks away at Locust and Bridgeway, at least from my understanding, and is limited to only a 3-hour stint. Events at our establishment typically run from 9 in the morning through midnight. If the long-term parking option at Dunphy is completely eliminated, our guests will have no other option but to park in the neighborhood, which we strongly feel is not the right way to go. This will be an enormous hardship for not only our own large events with upwards of 250 guests, but also for our renters and for the local neighborhood. The lack of long-term parking at this end of Sausalito will significantly impact our ability to rent our 5,500 square foot space, which has provided essential income to keep our nonprofit running for over 63 years. So we're not really asking you to consider adding, additional parking, but just to be able to still rent the lot, because that is going to impact the neighborhood significantly. Thank you.
Nina?
Hi, I'm Nina LeBaron. I'm a new resident of Sausalito. I've only been here since April. And I've come to the past 2 meetings, and there was no public announcement of this meeting that I could find on the web. And I've written to the park commissioners, and I haven't gotten any response. So I thank you for your time here. I thank you to the Friends of Dunphy Park. You've done a wonderful job. I did a little revision to the other detailed plan that I did before after talking to a few more people. And I strongly believe that the grasscrete idea is not, it will not compromise the public access to the park. That the grasscrete is a very viable option to have both parking and green grass, and that it be considered as part of the plan. And I guess my main concern is that it seems like a lot of the constituents that use the park have not been involved for some reason, and that's why we're having all these discussions about parking. I strongly believe that the parking should not be deleted, and that there's a way for parking to coexist with the park improvements. There's so many wonderful things about this park, about the shoreline access, about having bathroom facilities. And my main concern is that the budget is not talked about hand in hand with these designs. And I know that some of the budget is getting taken away because of the park over down here that is over budget. And so I think if the budget is part of the discussions from the beginning, that a handle of what can be actually done realistically, and maybe the whole park idea needs to be dialed down and just talk about what you actually have in the budget, and then incrementally add ideas as they can be afforded. So that's my idea. Thank you.
Thank you. The next 3, sorry, I should have been on this. Michael Wee, Michael Rex, And Patrick Seidler.
Hi, my name is Mike Wee. Nina just stole a little bit of my thunder there. I didn't really want to come here and argue about how we should, in an ideal world, design the park, because in thinking about this a lot over the last few weeks since the first meeting on this, it occurred to me the same thing that Nina brought up, which is we're making a master plan without cost estimates for any given part or a priority of procedure and what gets done first and with what money. And I think that's irresponsible, at the very least, if not disingenuous, because the reality is dangerous things can come of that. Suppose, for instance, that there are a few things that are necessary, right? We have to do the ADA. And it would be very good, if not necessary, to have a bathroom for the elderly, for kids, for other people to be able to use the park, right? But when you get through doing those things, and you know not just what you think it's going to cost, but what it actually costs, and then you have some money left. Now, I was a volunteer who helped get Measure F through to get this money here to make this at all possible. And that isn't going to go this far. So we have to be realistic about the fact that not everything can happen in this schematic at once, and the procedure that we do it in, whatever plan we come up with, whoever gets whatever they want, it has to not cause detriment. And by that I mean, for instance, suppose we go ahead and terraform the park and move the bocce courts right away, and then we find out, or take out the bocce courts in anticipation of moving them, and then after putting in the bathroom and the ADA and the new parking, we're out of money, and now we have no bocce courts. Now we have an empty space that has no trees and has the things that would be wonderful if they happened not done yet because we're out of money. And so we've already taken away the things that are there, and we don't have money to finish the plan. So I think the important thing is whatever we decide on, it has to be clear that we only do things, we only even start a part if we've got the money to finish that part, and that the things that are mandatory, the ADA, the bathrooms, that those get done first at actual cost, not at estimate cost, because we all have worked, I think, hopefully with contractors. And we know that that's not real. Like you go to them and they give you the number that they think you want to hear, so you'll give them the job. But then when you actually get done with the job, it was 50% more. So when we get done the things that have to be done and we've paid that 50% more, then we should be talking about what else we can do. Because right now, if we start making all these grand plans and spending a little bit of money towards all of it, and the money runs out, we've got a half-done park. And it's worse than we started. And this whole kind of concept of we're just going to pay for it as we go, let's be honest, we wouldn't have had to have Measure F if that worked. In 20 years, nothing happened to the parks until this huge chunk of money got released. So that idea that we're going to first just do the first 1.8 million of this and then the rest will just magically happen, that's not going to happen. The 1.8 million is all there is. So let's spend it wisely and not make any mistakes, okay?
Thank you. Michael Rex.
Hello, I'm Michael Rex. I want to commend the Friends again. I think we all appreciate their effort, and I also appreciate Jacques' explanation on some of the key issues. I don't think you should decide on a design and send a design to the City Council. I think you should send some recommendations on key topics, and I'd like to suggest some. In fact, ask that you make these recommendations. First and foremost, I'd like you to affirm and make a statement that the primary use of Dunphy Park is for recreation in a natural setting, both on land and water. I think we should be clear on what his primary use should be, and I think you should state it. I think I'd like to see strike from the plan this wildlife preserve. I think the channel that's proposed that small boats take to get in and out from the shore should be removed because it's not consistent with primary recreation uses. I think sailboats should be allowed at the north end to Cass Marina and the Cruising Club. That's traditional use and it should remain. If there is concern about the conflict between people and animals, let's see an environmental analysis. Let's evaluate the facts before we wall off part of our waterfront to water recreation. If there's spawning that occurs and portions of the water should be closed because of it, maybe it's seasonal, let's see the facts and then have a dialogue. Until then, those words should be removed. the North-South Greenway, Jacques says this plan isn't in conflict. This is a master plan for the future. Let's see it on the plan, even if it's not built tomorrow. That's what a master plan's for. In fact, I would suggest that we not concern ourselves with budget quite so much. This is a plan for our future. Let's figure out now how the pieces can fit together. Yes, that makes sense from an affordable standpoint, but not preclude good ideas to show how pieces fit together that we don't have the money for. Let's come up with the best plan and then find the money for it. That's how we plan for our future. I also ask that you recommend that the cruising club be continued to be explored, turning it and reorienting as shown here. It may not be feasible. Let's find out. I know Galilee's concerned about sound transmission to their vessels should it turn around as it's shown. Well, let's talk about, if that's the problem, how to mitigate sound transmission. But I think the merits of turning the cruising club, if it can be done, are great and therefore worth exploring. I want you to recommend that we preserve the concept of bringing the park to Bridgeway. I think it's one of the strongest parts of this plan. I would hate to see that railroad right-of-way be fully used for parking. This plan shows how to use it more efficiently by double loading. If there needs to be parking, first of all, what I'd like you to recommend is that there be a parking analysis. Let's determine the uses, the demand for parking, what we have available and what this plan proposes, and compare those facts. If those facts determine there needs more parking, maybe diagonal parking with an in and out along here would be another option, far superior to putting parking over here or along our shore or along the full length of Bridgeway. It should primarily be a park, not a parking lot. And if you have some questions about, because my time's up, but I would like to respond to the idea of putting public parking here, either to serve the park or joint use. Since I'm the architect for Bridgeway Marina, I'd be happy to comment on those if you have questions, because I'm out of time. Okay? Thank you.
Patrick and then Sue.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Seidler. I'm with Transportation Alternatives for Marin. Thank you very much, Commissioners. I'd also like to thank you for the process and Jacques and his team, the city, the people who've all been commenting, the citizens, and I really applaud, all the folks who are here. One of the most articulate group of people, I get to see around the county, and it's a great project. It's great to see that much public input, and I applaud you the direction you're heading. As I mentioned to you before, and I handed out previously, the North-South Greenway starts at the Golden Gate Bridge and goes to Cloverdale. It's been in our plan since 1974, and it was the Redwood route in the first Marin County Bike Plan. And then after that, in the 1994 North-South Bike Greenway Feasibility Study, 2008 City of Sausalito Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan, 2008 Marin County Unincorporated Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan, and the one that you're looking at in your slides, the 2011 City of Sausalito Ferry Terminal at Gate 6 Road Feasibility Study. Jacques gave us the information he passed and put on his schematic master plan. And I'd really, Michael, I got to tell you, Jacques reached out to us, and I want to compliment him for doing that. I feel very satisfied that he has this in the plan now, what I call sustainable mobility folks, so pedestrians, cyclists, transit. And I think he's done a really good job at that. And his language in there, we accept. And we have some other comments that are in it. So we just respectfully request Mr. Ullman's inclusion of the North-South Greenway remain in the schematic master plan. And when you go to working drawings, that you then incorporate the profile of the pathway. We actually suggest some modifications to that to make it a little bit better. So, but anyway, thank you very much for the inclusion in the process. We think it's heading in the right direction as far as our issue is concerned. But we see there's some really complex issues here. The only other one that I'm going to speak toward, just kind of urge you to consider is, I got to say, coming here and seeing it, I love being in Sausalito. I love seeing the Dunphy Park, of course. But I got to tell you, it seems to me it's a little ironic that I like driving and parking my car wherever I go. When I go to the store, I want a parking space. When I go here, I want a parking space. I want parking spaces everywhere for me. But the oceans are rising because we're driving our cars too much. And if you look at this, isn't it ironic that we're sitting on the edge of the ocean, the sea, and we're trying to put a parking lot on top of a park? Does that strike anybody? So I really think that's the seminal issue for you is a sustainable culture, sustainable mobility, sustainable park. And I see the conflict. I get it. And so that's, of course, what you've been appointed for, what the City Council's been elected for. And we wish you the very best as you consider those issues. And thank you for considering ours. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Sue Verhollen. I'm at 300 Napa Street. I'm speaking for myself, although I am a member of Galilee Harbor, and I've been there for 30 years. And besides that, I was born and raised in this, in this county, and I raised my children in this county. And I wasn't going to speak tonight until the first several people started talking about not needing parking spaces. I want you all to know that I got home about 6:45 tonight, and there were 3 spaces left in our parking spot. I don't know who the cars were that I parked next to that. And I did manage to drive my car up because I didn't know how late we would be tonight. And I don't know if I'm going to have a place to park when I get home. As much as everybody wants to talk about the theory about things, and this is supposed to be open space and we're not supposed to be driving cars, the reality is people will come and park, and if there's not a place to park at Dunphy Park, they're going to pull into what could have been my space at Galilee. And that could be on the weekend, that could be in the evening when there's things happening, at the cruising club, whatever else. I was astounded a couple of weeks ago when some suggested that maybe Galilee should put a gate across their driveway. We have prided ourselves on not having locked gates on our docks. We have prided ourselves on not having locked gates where you have to get in and get out and be someone with a card to get and park where you live. We don't want to be the parking police. That gets real old, having to be, the old grouch is saying we're going to tow you, with that. We don't look at our contribution to the city as being thought of in those ways. So please, it is not just a simple issue. And if you all think about it this way, if you pulled up to your house and you pulled into your drive but weren't able to because someone was parked in your driveway, I wonder how you would feel about that, and how vexing that could be if that happened on an ongoing basis. So please, please think about that. I agree with Mike about the issue of we're not seeing budgets. I know a budget is a plan, that's all it is. I think we need to prioritize what gets built here. I agree with him. We don't need to be starting part of it that we can't finish if we don't have the money at this time. And I still believe we can plan to incorporate a lot of things that maybe we don't have all the money for now. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to chime in? Seeing John Donovan, hop up there. So I know you're quicker than that.
Thank you, everybody. I find it very interesting. There's a few things that I wanted to talk about tonight. I find it very interesting that the people who are really against the parking and the most of the time are the people who actually don't have to drive to the park. If you live across the street from the park or nearby, I can see why you wouldn't want any cars parked in your view or near your park or near your house. That would be great. But unfortunately, most of the people who live in Sausalito and most of the people who use the park, that's not a reality for them. People with kids, stuff, we have to drive to the park. And the fact of the matter is that in Sausalito, while we'd like to think there's a ton of parking, there's actually not. And the setup in Dunphy Park right now, funnily enough, it works pretty good the way that it is. I'm for improvements, but they need to be improvements for everybody, not just for certain people's views or certain people's parking and quality of life. It needs to be for everybody. This isn't my main focus of speak right now, so I'm going to get into really what I'm after, and that's the cruising club. I'm the rear commodore this year, and I've kind of picked up that we're getting a little bit of lip. My main goal would be for you guys to recommend that the cruising club stays in its current orientation. And I'm going to put forth a little bit of information before my time runs out to just where we're at with the Cruising Club and what we've been doing. It's a lot of people have said that it's going to be great to get the youth involved in rowing, to get the youth involved in the water. We're actually doing that right now. I'm going to read a little bit of the notes that I wrote, see if I can get through this. We're a historic club. The Cruising Club has been there. It was established in 1949. Our clubhouse was built in the early 60s. We've had a lot of prominent names in sailing come through the Cruising Club. Sterling Hayden is one of those people. Today we're a very unique establishment. Aside from our amazingly historic clubhouse, we offer a variety of water-based activities. Now I want to tell you guys too that this isn't a private club in the fact that no one can join it. We open arms to everybody, and it's very affordable. We have a fleet of dinghies, kayaks, SUPs, even original prone paddleboards available to use. We've got 2 keel boats, 2 motorboats that are also available after you've been checked out with them, and we offer instruction and use of these vessels for free. Last year, we signed about 100 new members, all Sausalito families with young kids, mostly from Willow Creek School. This year, our dynamic 3rd grade teacher from Willow Creek, Ann Siskin, and the music teacher have joined the club, and we're looking forward this year to putting on kids' camps teaching kayaking, nature, art, and music. We're not thinking about doing this. We're actually doing this. We have had many successful kids' days, sail-outs, that have been instrumental in connecting our young families with the waterfront that makes our city famous. We host an annual crayfish boil that last year raised $4,000 for the Willow Creek Academy, and we would like to see all of you there this year. It's on April 2nd. The buzz that we have generated with our... Can I continue a little bit? People have gone over this.
Really quickly.
The buzz that we've generated with our waterfront activities has attracted the attention of Sausalito Community Boating Center, Casas Marina. We're welcoming them with open arms, and we're in talks right now about how we can help kickstart their project to work together in the future to assure that our youth and community has the affordable waterfront access to keep the city's heritage alive. I want to thank you guys.
Thank you, John. Anybody else? Awesome comments. Thank you. We have a lot. This is our first time at having such a big exposure to the public and taking notes, and I don't think any of us have taken this many notes before. So thank you all again. I also wanted to bring up that we had, like I said, those other meetings, and the facilitator at that time, Pam, put together a list that was just kind of grouping some of those areas, and I just want to touch on those quickly. We have valid items that were brought up again tonight. Some of those fall in this, some are different, but kind of to bring together the 3 meetings in some key areas, because like one of the commenters said, we should really start formulating what our recommendation upwards to council is and start putting those into some criteria points. Parking, obviously, which we hit on tonight. The northeast corner congestion. There was talk of the passive use being the center of the park, where I think the plan was the passive use is the far end, which would be the southeast corner, multi-use in the middle. The active use being the bocce. I guess active use is also volleyball, though we haven't pursued that. Park safety was brought up often in hiding spaces, without designing social behavior, creating a park that has safety features, both approved by the police as well as the design itself. Wildlife preserve facilities, mainly being the bathroom or storage, and paths and waterfront, and then the cruising club, which we have somewhat punted because that is a discussion happening completely outside of this group. There currently is discussion with the cruising club in the city at a different level and a different group of people. However, I believe we have, as Jacques has said, the entire plan, which shows both ways. It does show the cruising club in its current spot as well. So I don't know if we're necessarily making that recommendation, but it was brought up in these. Process, Mike touched on it. We now punt, boot, kick it back up to council. Council will more than likely, go through a planning commission. this is the key opportunity to get some changes and to get some recommendations for this plan noted by the public to council. It isn't the absolute final. We have we have more. We have the next layer of the onion skin to rip off, and there will be some discussion at that point. So you know, we still are looking at the schematic master plan as kind of that, you know, 10,000 square foot aerial, and then we still have the items that really talk about the fine detail of planning, budgeting, where the money's going to come from, what items make it, what items don't. That was not intended to be a part of a schematic master plan, but it is intended to happen through the public and still have an opportunity for the public to speak to it. That, I'm going to open it up to commission comments, questions. If you have a specific question you would like to ask, we can definitely do that. I think it's prudent that we get all the questions answered. So if you have a question for anybody who spoke tonight, please feel free to do so. Cindy, would you like to start?
I don't think I have any questions. I think it's been very, very complete. I will say I walked the property with Jacques and Paul. I understand a lot better after having seen it physically. I also met with members of Galilee. I understand their concerns a lot better. I think it's going to be a fabulous park, whichever way we go with it. I do want to make a couple of suggestions that won't change this plan necessarily. One of the major concerns was from the Bocce group, and I would like to suggest that as a future agenda item, we as a Parks and Rec Commission look into putting bocce courts in other parks. So I'd like to see that be added. Because I know some people want 4, there are 2 now, they want 4 or even more. It's a popular thing. I understand there's a waiting list. But we have other parks, and we have other parks that could possibly take on that activity in a not very expensive way of adding it, because they're already flat. And there's parking and other things that we need that go with bocce. Does anyone else want to talk about bocce?
No, go ahead.
Okay. One thing that the bocce members did express concern over was if the bocce courts are moved to that north end, they'll lose a view. And they have a great view now, but if you actually consider what all is going to happen in this park, there's a big stand of trees that block a view, as well as a cruising club. But if those trees are and will be taken away because they're not the appropriate kind of tree for the kind of soil that's there, the view opens up. And I know cruising club is not a part of this plan, but it has been suggested that the club could be moved 50 feet north. That also opens up the view. And I'll just make a comment after meeting with the members of residents of Galilee to tilt that thing the way it is. If you look at that area from their homes where they live with their children, a lot of the activities going on will be viewed directly by these children getting their homework done or whatever, and block their view, which they've enjoyed for many years and put many efforts into establishing that property there. And should I keep going?
If you've got more, lay it out there.
Okay, parking concerns for Galilee, that I understand. You know, all of us in Sausalito have parking issues. I really think that they need to maybe go against their prior viewpoint on this, but I do think that their spaces should be numbered. And they already have signs, you know, towing will happen, but if they have numbered spaces, it will be taken much more seriously by people infringing on their parking hours. And they're gonna just have to, unfortunately, like I would, somebody said, what if somebody came and blocked my driveway? If it kept happening, I would call the police, and the police would take care of it, and that person wouldn't do it again. So, yeah, unfortunately, that might have to take place for a little bit, but then people will get used to the idea that those are spots for the residents of Galilee. And I think the spots that are on the property
that's shown in the diagram here that are their spots should also be numbered. And from what I understand, they're okay with having it be nighttime parking. It won't be daytime restriction. I think we do need to look for other parking spaces in the city, other places that can be developed into parking. I personally, as a commissioner, want to see this be a park. I don't want to see it be a parking lot. And I understand it's a popular place, there's a lot going on, but I realize, for example, if I'm going to come to Dunphy for an activity, I need to walk. And I live on 4th Street, and that's, you know, a mile or whatever. But that's just a fact of life. I think we need to add maybe a drop-off point for people who can't walk, for people who want to drop off their picnic items and whatever. But that, you know, they're going to have to park someplace else, possibly, if it's a very popular activity. One other thing I wanted to mention, because I don't think Jacques brought it up, but maybe it's in the plan now, but I understand there's a lot of concern about the bushes being removed along the roadway. You know, children could run through there and run into traffic, and so it could be a dangerous situation. Well, those would be removed, a broader walkway established, and bushes put adjacent to the roadway itself, not on the interior side of the path. So that's what I have.
Thank you. Sheila?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the Friends of Dunphy Park for their hard work on this plan. It's wonderful. With special thanks to Jacques Ullman and Paul Leffingwell. I know they spent countless hours and their expertise in designing this park and generously donated their time. Thank you. And I'd also like to thank the community for their comments over the past few months. I guess I would like to start with a question for Jacques about, can a turnabout be installed at the northeast corner to allow, to provide easier access for drop-offs and deliveries for the park and the cruising club right there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the areas that we did not color, we didn't color for a reason, because the only thing we could do was trace off of plans that we were given by Casa Marina, I think it was basically from Casa Marina. And so those areas need more detailed design. And if there's input from police or fire or anyone else here, I mean, some adjustment here may have to be made. I mean, that's, that could be a recommendation that be studied in more detail. I mean, that's fine.
So that's a possibility.
Sure.
Jacques, I have another question for you while you're there. Is it possible to have a little bit more space between the proposed bocce ball courts and the volleyball?
Well, I believe that we did a study that would reorient the volleyball to give more space, but actually you have to understand that rectangle, the outside, there's already space between the actual court and the outside of the sand area, and then of course the bocce courts are the rectangles, the dark rectangles you see, and then there's space around it. So there's perhaps a little more space than the eye envisions on the plan. I forget exactly what it was, Paul, but I think we came up with something like 25 to 30 feet, I think, between the two. Not sure, but I mean, obviously there's some small adjustments could be made.
That can be made. Just a general question. Some nearby residents have commented that no one uses the volleyball courts. Very few people use the volleyball courts. So why do we have a volleyball court incorporated into this park? I guess is my question.
Well, it's interesting because when I first came to Sausalito, there was a very active volleyball league, and there was no bocce. So things can turn around. So maybe the courts wouldn't be built at first, but we felt we did have to allocate space, and in time some of these things may readjust themselves. But it did seem to be popular, and it may be that with a redesigned park that more people will gravitate toward it.
Regarding parking, I know there's some very valid concerns. The north end of the park serves many users, including Casa Marina, Cruising Club, and the rowing club that exists. We know that Casa Marina intends to grow. It sounds like the Cruising Club is growing. So I'm concerned about, and I know many residents are concerned about congestion in that northeast corner. I agree with Cindy, Commissioner Powers, about numbering the spaces at Galley Harbor. That sounds like a great idea to help deter people from entering their main lot. I'm not in favor of putting in the grass creek on the railroad tie. I like the plan as is as far as an openness going into the park. I would like to see some sort of a low hedge, low vegetation barrier that perhaps could be placed between the sidewalk and the street. Perhaps it could help block cars. The view of the cars, if you're sitting in the park having a picnic close to that area, you're not going to view the cars or the street traffic as it goes by. But yet, if you were walking, you would still be able to look into the park very clearly and see the waterfront and the park. I think it would also help with some safety issues, say children or dogs that might be throwing balls or frisbees. Low vegetation barrier might be helpful there. Jacques, I wanted to thank you for your additional 3 slides. I had questions on all 3 of those items that you made changes to, so thank you for doing that. Those answered my questions there. Mike, I don't know if you can answer this question, but to remove the larger trees in Dunphy Park, do you know how much that would cost?
That's not something that I would know
You would know
what it is, no.
Would you say it's a major expense to cut down large trees like that?
Does our Public Works Director have any comment or?
Sure. Hi, Jonathan Goldman, Public Works Director and City Engineer. In the grand scheme of things, I don't see tree removal as a major expense, but as a number of speakers have indicated, and as I suspect you're going to recommend, developing a budget for the project that takes all those costs into account and the additional activities into account that need to be done to get to a place where it can be bid and constructed is an important step in the process.
Just might mention that I think it was a couple of years ago, there was a tree or a large portion of a tree that I believe fell on a car, and so we already had an expense. I think the city's attitude was better to pay the deductible and get it over with, and the insurance, I guess, there was a deductible. So there's there's a potential cost in the fact that these trees are falling down. One of them fell down the day after our first forum before you. So, you know, that's the cost, there are costs both ways.
Shaw, just one question, a further question. Would you say that the trees are being replaced because they're dead, they're dying, and they're endangered?
Well, thanks for asking the question. We consulted with the city maintenance staff and with horticulturalists on this subject, and if you go down there, you'll see that a lot of the trees have the roots exposed because this site was a dump, and then it was developed into a park. And you know, it was a great thing that the volunteers went down there and did some 40 years ago. But in fact, the right way to do it is you have to over-excavate, remove some of the material, replace with better material. You have to have good drainage. And one of the benefits of more mounding is that the mounding allows us to import more good soil. And then we're planning to have the trees placed mostly on those mounds, both for that benefit, plus that's where people gravitate to sit, and that's where they find the shade. And then the choice of trees, you know, don't know how the choices were made, but unfortunately, I think there's a black acacia in there, and I think there are Monterey pines and other trees that are just not very appropriate, and they're even aesthetically, they're kind of dark, and things don't grow underneath. So we need to sort of take a step backwards to move many steps forward in a sense. So that's the situation we're in. It just seems advisable, and we got professional input on the condition of the trees. They're not in good condition. The maintenance people find them a difficulty, and they'd be very happy to see them replaced.
Was any consideration to view the reason for removing trees? Was that ever a consideration?
Well, yes, there is, because the tree we want to replace with trees which have more of a tendency to umbrella.
I'm
so
sorry,
you can
views
see
from the hillside residents. To
well,
eliminate.
that's not a no. That wasn't so much an issue, because I don't think it is an issue. It's much more from the street level.
Okay. Anything else? No.
I mean, yes, of course we would. The new trees might take that into consideration, but.
I have a couple questions as well, and I was going to ask, is Sue still here? Oh, Sue, good, you are here. I see you peeking around there. Can I ask you a question, Sue, just really quickly? Because I'm going to start with parking, just because it was on my list first. Is the rest of the park full, and somebody parked in your spot tonight? The entire parking at Dunphy's full?
Mr. Commissioner, could I
Sorry.
remind that we need you to come up to the podium there. Thank you.
We don't have assigned spaces at Galilee, and we have 2 or 3 people that are allowed to call and tow. So when I drive home and there's no place for me to park, and if it's, you know, later at night, that means I'm going to knock on someone's boat, and usually at that point I go like, you don't want to necessarily do that all the time. In the past, we've had assigned spaces. I prefer to have assigned spaces, but there would still have to be an arrangement about who can call the towing company, because they're not going to answer when there's, how many adults do we have there? You know,
Okay.
we have 68 spaces, so if 68 people are calling and say, come and tow a car, the towing company's not going to do it unless they know it's someone that's authorized to do it, because they don't want to get stuck with that other end of it. So we've kind of been between a rock and a hard spot a lot of the times, too. And then I go back to, we don't like being the police.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm trying to draw the nexus between a full parking spot and the overflow into an adjacent residence spot, and I I'm looking at, what do we have as evidence of something working? And I see something working fairly well right down the street at Bar Bocce, oddly enough, Bocce, where there's about 60 spots for 2 businesses that could upwards of 400 to 500 people on premise on a Saturday afternoon. And a residence next door with residence parking has done a very good non-policing job in not having parking in their spot. They have a sign, and I don't think the sign is beautiful. I wished it wasn't there. But I think that sign does change the behavior of people saying, well, I can't park at Bar Bocce, so I'm going to pull into these residences and park. Because I want to be really respectful to our neighbor at Galilee, and that the people who have invested in that community and live in that community get to park in their community and not have somebody who came to the park there. And I want to make sure that we have that separation. I've kind of boiled it down to 3 areas, and you have parking rules, regulations, permits, you have behavior, and then you have volume. And I'm not sure we can solve an issue of parking with volume along the waterfront. I look at that plan. I think Nina's where you have 50 spots here and another, and it's pretty much, the entire perimeter of the park, other than near the water, is optional parking. That isn't the sense of entry we're trying to create with a park, that you walk over Crete and parking reflectors or cement parking stops to get to the park. That's actually the opposite direction of what the intent was when we had some of these public discussions, and the people said, we want a sense of entry. We want to be able to go from sidewalk to bay. It's a place of I'm entering a park, not I'm crossing through a parking lot. So as I look at some of the dual use of adding parking on top of a grass area, what I'm really hearing is we're making it a parking lot that's green, and I don't think that was accomplishing what we set out early nor at this point. I do really support the idea, and I'm glad Jacques was able to answer Sela's question, and Cindy brought it up well, of a turnaround or a 5-minute zone or something that allows park users to drop equipment, small boats, those types of things, and move on and park either further back in the park, or if it's full, not park at the neighbors, but park somewhere on one of the surface streets, especially on this side of town, where in the evenings there, unless there's an event at IDIS, there usually is some parking on Caledonia or Bridgeway, as I'm a neighbor there, and I see that quite often. I was supportive of additional parking on what's being called the passive use, which is part of the additional acquisition, but that would be contingent upon confirmation and or at least a stronger understanding of the coastal the conservancy purchase of that land, because it makes sense in theory, but if that is a violation of that purchase, obviously it wouldn't work. But past that, one of the plans that we did receive from the community last week showed a bifurcation of that, partly parking on a Crete style that isn't a sense of entry or a sense of park enjoyment. It is a less impacted area and still gives it some passive use. That is one of the things I'm willing to say is almost a punt to further discussion, which I'm going to make a couple other recommendations to further discussion or further study, which I would include in that the wildlife preserve eelgrass area. I think it's prudent for this plan, for a future plan, for a lot of different areas, and our park director has mentioned before of getting professional people in the room and recording that discussion and getting the proper information to make a judgment on what type of path of travel we need, what type of uses can occur, what type of mitigation or even planting in another area would mitigate the use. Because I am in agreement that should be first used as recreation unless study showed us otherwise. And I believe that is the intent of the boat ramp that's shown here, the access to get the small boats down there. I look at that plan as saying that's the start of saying we're open to small craft, non-keel boats, and if a study says there's an absolute path of travel, then we should educate community on that. If there's other mitigations, I don't think we can solve that tonight, but I will recommend that council have that information to them when they make that decision, that we have that discussion. Same with parking to a degree. I get the number. Again, it would be the number for our use as it relates to Galilee, and the part that's not on this map that's Galilee's. I think that is an absolute no-brainer, that's Galilee's parking, and however they're going to manage it, do it. The other space that is what we've considered to be shared space, and based on legal counsel, potentially something else may be occurring if there's not an easement, but that would be new information to me. I would go as far as recommend to council that they devise parking for that spot only, and if Galilee can get 18 or whatever their needed spots on that and still provide an easement, it's their property. There's agreements in place, and I think there's some ambiguity to them, but from the most part, we think there's an 8-spot shared agreement. I would like to see that obviously continue if that's currently in place, but I think that needs further discussion as opposed to just buying on a certain number today, especially if Galilee has plans where they can get more spots in there that fit their use, that are legal, that fit fire's use, and don't impede on our land. Because if they're willing to draw that line, we would too, but that might be a difficult line if they have to travel onto it, especially if we don't have easements. So I'm open for more discussion on that. I'm really not, I'm just not amicable to opening more cement or more paved area in this park. I think if we can't solve the park's need with the amount of cement and pavement I see there, we have some other social behaviors to discuss. But I have talked to a lot of people, and I think somebody said they're not here tonight. Well, they have spoke to this plan, and they have spoke to it a few times, and that discussion was they didn't require a lot of parking. I've since talked to some people who say they never consider having to drive to the park, and they're not Caledonia Street locals. They are Hill locals. They are people that get that waterfront isn't necessarily a one-for-one parking use style facilities. So it would take more for me to more information and study that I think City Council should employ either through this process or through the Planning Commission, that they figure out how they can work that agreement with Galilee, and if Galilee has a plan for 18 spots, let's see it worked into this plan, because it's not our property to propose, except for the 8 spots that we have agreement with. I totally support all the rowing uses that have been brought up as far as, education and youth and adults and the power of it. And not to speak to this plan, but there's other ideas for adjacent uses and neighbors going forth. I'd love to see those, because I think that is an important element of this park and the recreational uses that have been prescribed along the way. Restroom location and jumping to that active use area, or what I call the specific use area, because it's been defined as bocce and volleyball, and we know that the two areas have now become bocce heavy and volleyball use less. I agree with that. I think it's a great comment to, 4 courts to me is too much here. 3 is pushing it. 2 was good. If we need more bocce in Sausalito, I'd love it. I play bocce, but it needs to fall somewhere else. I think as we go to 4 to 6 to 8 needs, that's a viable situation, but it might have to take place at Marin Ship or MLK or someplace else. I just don't see it turning this into a bocce court because of what's titled there multi-use. And I'm in the minority as I talk to maybe people here, that I look at multi-use as the active center of our park. As I'm out there on a daily basis, I see more people running dogs, playing games, reading, enjoying the park for its grass, and not so much this last month, but using the berms, the hillsides, the views, the benches, the tables. We need more picnic tables. They're using the park much more than they're using the park for bocce. Granted, the 50 nights a week and the 3 Saturdays 50 nights a year and the 3 Saturdays, it's an impact. I get it. I live on Turney. I see that there's events occasionally that impact us all. I would hate to design parking around it, but as it sits in this park, I like where it sits because of the proximity to the bathroom and the parking, and I would not propose to move it for the sake of moving it, definitely not for construction costs, but to create a path of travel between those areas, to impede on the multi-use of big space for parties, for the Zydeco, for the 4th of July, for the chili cook-off, to make the multi-use basically sandwiched by two activities, and again, stretching the word activity for the current volleyball, but I really look at it as one activity there, and it's located next to the bathrooms. I haven't, other than what Cass Marina used to be, I can't begin to plan parking for their proposed need on this, though I'm sure that they will have some, and I'm hoping it's shared, and I'm hoping it doesn't flow into Galilee, and I'm hoping on the use of regulation, permits, and behavior to keep that from happening, like it does elsewhere in Sausalito along the waterfront. This isn't new to have a lot of activities going on, and making parking work, and the people next to it maintaining their use. I have a question. I think maybe Jonathan, and as an engineer and traffic consideration on these hedges, I assumed both the sense of entry and the bay sidewalk to bay view shed, the hedges would go, but from a safety issue, I really think they should go. As a person with a small dog and a small kid, I look at hedges as as an absolute traffic hazard. So I'd throw it back to, if the engineer can speak to how do hedges work as far as kids popping out into traffic between a hedge or open lines of sight with traffic. Where would you see as a safety issue?
I'm not entirely sure I understand your question, but let me see if I can come up with something that satisfies you. Certainly the concept that even though the speed limit is 25 miles an hour on Bridgeway in this road segment, there's a lot of traffic there. There are motor vehicles, buses, bicyclists that aren't afraid to ride with motor vehicles. And as you've seen with the ferry landing to Gate 6 path plan, there's the objective of improving the off-street facilities for both pedestrians and bicyclists to make their transit of this area safer. And all of those north-south, if you will, vehicles, if you'll allow me to include bicycles as vehicles, and even pedestrians that aren't there because they want to get to or from the park, create a hazard for a potential hazard for people who either want to get to the park or for people who are already in the park. And as you mentioned, if there are children playing a game that involves a ball and the ball rolls towards Bridgeway, it's certainly somewhat safer to have something between the ball and Bridgeway that will stop the ball and ideally prevent a child from chasing the ball into Bridgeway. The same kind of issue, though, exists with the pedestrians and the off-street bicycle path, potentially. So that is an element that needs to be taken into account in the detailed design of this project. How can those potential safety issues be best dealt with without creating adverse impacts, to views or something like that? And I think if you look at not only these, but also the ferry landing to Gate 6 path plan, there is a planter strip that is intended to separate at least Bridgeway from the other activities. But the question about bicyclists on that multi-use off-street path is also valid. And I'm sure you've seen increasing numbers of people using the existing very wide sidewalk there because they're not comfortable riding their bicycles with cars and traffic. So we need to be able to continue to facilitate their safe transit, but not create or try to avoid creating opportunities for conflict between those two. That issue is actually in here on the lower left corner of this slide from the ferry landing to Gate 6 path plan as one of the concepts for dealing with the Napa Street crossing with that mixture of traffic. That and the utility pole that Jacques alluded to make that situation very complicated and one that doesn't lend itself well to broad brush solutions, and is an issue that I think is important to take into detailed design no matter what. No matter what else happens in the park, the concept of how best to prevent adverse conflicts between those uses is important and needs to be taken into account.
Great.
Did
Thank
that
you.
answer your question?
So noted. I'll have to watch it a couple times on the video to see if it really did. Michael, did your concern on the north-south being on the plan are you okay with what you heard since, as far as it's on the plan that's going to council?
If you could put that slide back up. The answer is no. I'll show you why. Yeah, here. This is what it's going to take to get people from the north-south Greenway over to the bike path that runs between my building and Galilee. This solution won't work because if a bike comes here, if they have to go down Napa Street to get over to this path, they don't know that. They can't see it. The only way they're going to get from here to here is outside the street. The path has to turn because if they're lined up with it, then they'll use it. I know because I see it every day. The bicyclists that come along Bridgeway never see this path. To do this requires some adjustment to the parking lot, as it's stated here. And we should, if we're talking about laying out a parking lot, this is a perfect example why the design of the parking lot and the design of the greenway need to be coordinated.
And and that's suggested going to council that we do that.
I think a future master plan has to show this future route, and it has to show a plan for the park that coordinates well with it. This won't work. That's what we have today, and it doesn't work.
Right. Okay. I guess that's what I would propose, is that we look at a proposal that works. That's as stated here. That's on this plan that's going to council, right? That was easy. I don't have anything. I saw two hands go up. Mike, Yui, you good? John? Oh, you're not that loud. They can't hear you at home.
I'm going to keep this one short, but one of the things that kind of caught my buzz with the hedges being removed along the roadway there is the roadway pollution, and I think that's something to really consider for the getting into the park and then into the bay. If you walk along and look in the foot of all the hedges that exist today, you'll see all kinds of road rubble that will make its way right across there with the prevailing wind blowing that way. I think that keeping a hedge of some sort along that is going to be a protective thing just to keep the road pollution from getting into the park and then getting into the bay. So
okay.
Consider. Thank you.
Sell the space to diners. Apparently people want to eat there. Any other comments that we've just missed on that we haven't addressed? Sorry to open it back up to the public, but we're now in our wind down.
I do have a question. I have a question about just the water use for this space. There seems to be quite a bit of lawn there. Is that really turf or lawn? It has to be watered. We have these regulations, these new water conservation regulations in California where you can't actually water that much space. So I think before something like this is proposed, you've got to make sure that you've got the water. Is it recycled water? I mean, where's this water coming from? You can't water any lawn space that's over 15-degree angle. So if you're talking about berms and they're over 15 degrees, you can't water them. So there's some real details here that need to be worked out as far as that goes.
You're right, and product, I think we've talked about, is coming down the line, but I think Jacques can answer a portion of that really quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the first things we did was to meet with the maintenance staff, and they gave us the maximum slope that they could maintain a lawn on, mow properly, and that would survive well. And so we disciplined ourselves. We wanted to actually have higher berms. The berms were kept down to keep to the instructions we got from the maintenance crew. And we're doing extensive research on finding a grass that is low water and that will survive the high wear that it gets for the big events. But we also all have to realize that since we're trying to conserve water, we're not going to have golf course type green. We have to accept, like at our ranch up in Mendocino, we have nice dry grass. It's very beautiful in the summer, the Golden State. So grass is fine. It's certainly a lot better than gravel, or the grasscrete would be even worse if the grass didn't grow and weren't properly watered. So I think we've thought about that.
I have one more.
Yes, please, let's go
comment.
back to Cindy and Sheila.
So just thinking about this a little bit further and hearing more comments about, the concerns about what's being termed active use on the north end, I wonder if we should maybe not put in that volleyball court unless we hear that it is going to be used quite a bit or there's some sort of league that really wants it. But let's suggest to council that we not put it in yet. Let's see how it goes with those bocce courts. And if that is very noisy for Galilee, or you're hearing that come across that parking lot over to you, and it's invasive to you, let's see how that goes. And then maybe we put in the volleyball court if everything goes well. So just a suggestion.
Does eliminating volleyball concern you for sound or noise?
No. Volleyball, not a problem.
What about the suggestion of moving the bocce ball courts to where the volleyball courts are?
Bocce didn't want that because they were going to lose their view.
Mike?
I'll speak loudly.
Nope. The people at home, as loud as you are, they can't hear you.
I'm a league bocce player and lifetime bocce player, and I guess I don't know why we have to move it at all. It works where it is. I don't see what that benefits except for views on Litho Street. So
I think path of travel, restrooms, getting there. I mean, bocce. We have spoke with that with bocce and for park design efficiency, as opposed to spreading it out and causing. Well, again, for park design, there's a lot of reasons that wasn't.
Well, and my understanding.
Park design, as far as I can tell, is just creating this view.
Thanks. I don't think that was the goal.
Just one thought that I have, and I could see this when I walked the property with Paul and Jacques, those berms, that grassy area, if you have the bocce there, you can't get that going soon enough to really have the effect and have the berms and have the seating areas and the trees and the land that people can run and play and chase their dogs, and so it's important to have that moved over to that other side where near the parking lots and the restroom, you kind of separate what is being termed as active versus passive.
Sheila, did you have anything else?
I do. I have a question for Mike. Mike, what is the lot to the iGest Hall for special events.
And how often?
Forward, once it's in place.
Well, that would be something that if we wanted to make a policy, we would consult with you, of course. As we do now, we don't rent it out to two different groups at the same time. So, of course, if there is a busy use, whether it is a rental of the park or the bocce league night or something going on that would be using that parking, it wouldn't be available to anybody else to rent. And that's our current policy right now. If it is a night that we can foresee that the parking lot would not be heavily used, then I don't see at this time a problem with renting that to a different user group so they could park their vehicles.
All right, so we have now have to round all these cats up into one bag to present to council. I'm sorry. Is it really quick? Yeah, really fast. Yeah.
And I like to talk regarding maybe moving the volleyball court now. My observation has been, especially when there are larger events, that the sand especially is very much used by small children because they like sand. And recently I have seen, because I walk that area quite a bit, almost daily, that on weekends there has been an increase in the use of the volleyball. And I thought that was very favorable because it's a wonderful sport. I consider usually, I'm not a bocce ball, I can't say fan, I don't play it. So people have fun with it, but for me it's a social game. Volleyball is not. It's even played in the Olympics. So it's a much different sport. But when it comes to the use of children having it doing big events, I've seen them at 4th of July and at other cook-off, all the other bigger events that you have. Children concentrate there. Especially smaller ones. That's all I
Thank
have
you.
to say.
That's good. So we're going to try to get all this wrapped up, and I want to make a comment about where we've come to this point. And both people here and many of the speakers tonight thanked Paul and Jacques and the supporters they had and the process they had through Friends of Dunphy. And I don't think we could look past that. I mean, we can't not do that enough. With the money they've saved Sausalito and the process they've taken us to that which would otherwise have spent resources over these many years has been incredible. That said, and I'd hope they would agree with me, at some point that has to be turned over to somebody that is not only maybe more involved in park recreation fine-tuning, as well as having less bias or less a horse in the race, as everybody in this room does, as we all do, an outside designer. I don't want to throw everything on them. It's, we came to this process and we identified a lot of things, and they have gone through more than most designers could come up with as far as how this park is used, being residents and being longtime users and being original planners and those things. There's some of this detail I think that we're looking for. I hope that somebody could provide us more light. We as a Park and Rec Commission just simply aren't qualified to do parking studies and to come up with a parking schematic that can overlay something like this. We can say that we believe that answer's out there and we need to find it, and I think that's some of the steps that council kind of expected of us and that we need to do is say it's time that somebody else helped us, and truthfully that unfortunately that we have to spend money on it now, but that's where we are. So I hope that they'll understand that is the next step. So I'm looking at of our recommendations here that I should have these prepared. the commission recognize and thank the friends, Paul and Jacques, for the countless hours. That we suggest changes, or we recommend a plan with changes. Some of the changes that we had kind of thought about that had come up had been made, as Jacques pointed out earlier. So I think at this point we need to round up with a motion, but we need to have like I said, getting all these cats in the bag, we need to have a strong recommendation for what that next group needs to come up with answers that this body and the future bodies can apply to what we heard tonight. Anybody?
So, I'm going to have a draft move here, a motion here. I move that we recommend the complete Dunphy Park schematic master plan for council's approval, for council's consideration and approval, with the changes we as commissioners have suggested notated to them for their consideration.
Notated to them. Staff, what did she mean? Is that something we could take off the recorded?
Well, I would much prefer a list. I have taken some notes here.
I think we need to.
And if you would like me, I can
Yeah.
read these as you've been talking. Some of the things I think you have recommended so far that a turnaround at the northeast corner be looked at, that a 5-minute zone somewhere or something like that, a loading zone, be looked at, that the number of parking spaces be looked into more closely within regards to Galilee Harbor's lease and Cruising Club and Cass and everything that's going on there, while trying to not increase the amount of paved parking. You have recommended that Galilee Harbor work with the city of Sausalito, and the city of Sausalito, of course, work with Galilee Harbor on enforcing their parking rules and limits on the private property there. More detail on the north-south greenway and how that can be incorporated into the plan. And then I also heard things that you guys weren't going to decide on today, and kind of punt those to the council, or perhaps they may come back here, but as a separate agenda items, separate meetings. One of them is the designating the water area as a water preserve and restricting boat traffic there. The other one was...
I'm sorry. We are proposing that?
No, saying that is something that should be discussed at a future meeting of either Parks and Recreation Commission or City Council, but somewhere when we can discuss that specifically. And I'm referring to the area out here in the water. So have experts come in and tell us, educate everybody before a decision is made. You also suggested potentially having the council look at some parking along the Zach's property, so right on the, please correct me if I'm wrong, right along here somewhere, or somewhere in here, look at what can we do to have parking on the south end of the park.
As it relates to coastal conservancy.
Yes. The other thing you talked about was the parking on Galilee Harbor's lot. It was mentioned today that there was a plan for 18 spaces, and what is before us now is fewer spaces. So if they have a way to park more of their vehicles on their property, then they could go ahead and proceed with that on their own. Of course, any plan that would be, you got property right next to each other, you need to work together, but having them work on that plan and move that one forward. And then the final one that I have as far as punting is the position of the cruising club.
That's easy enough.
So is there anything else that you want to say, this is what should happen, and this is what we're punting, and this is what shouldn't happen?
I would move my concern on let's call it the Galilee Strip parking and their use more into the recommended that council work, or that be looked at further, as opposed, it's a punt still, but it's not a change, but it's much stronger than any consideration I meant for cruising club. Is just, there it is, eliminate it if you want, which we know isn't a part of this discussion at all. So I don't know, I'm strong on all those, so yeah. Oh, one other thing. I'm sorry. Yeah, I did have one other thing. I do want to have some type of further analysis of large tree, if there is. And I think this is, whether it's a separate study, which I hate to just throw money around for a separate study, or the next party of designer, to identify if there's any tree saving on the larger species that are out there, or even just identifying. I know it's in here, but before we just cut the large trees, I want to have one more assurance on that they need to go.
So you're referring to like an arborist report? Okay.
Did you have anything?
So that's my motion.
That's my motion.
And we need a second?
Yeah. You go.
So we have a motion and a second. Why don't we do a roll?
Yeah, so discussion? Do you have any discussion on those items? I just want to make sure before we send this off that
Would you like me to run through those again?
we're recommending with changes and potential punt as our two criteria. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and one other thing which is not for council at this point, but to add to our future agenda, looking into placing bocce courts in other parks.
Future agenda item.
Additional motion?
It's fine.
Just
We don't
agenda
need
item?
we don't need a
Okay.
motion for that. For the commission and for the rest of the audience, I do have another announcement that tomorrow at noon we are having the groundbreaking ceremony at Robin Sweeney Park. You're all welcome to join us out there. You may have noticed the fencing went up today, and the construction is going to begin anytime now.
If your questions weren't answered tonight, check with Mike. I know there's still some questions on process. There was a lot on budget that we just didn't touch because it really wasn't this, but it is parts of the next step on how we pay for this. And I think it's prudent if you want to check with Mike. We could even put something on the Dunphy Park org page so that we can keep that as a liquid document that we continue to refresh and look at for that type of information. But it wasn't something for us to kick up to council at this point, but it is a valid discussion and a valid process as next steps. So please keep in touch with Mike on that or the site. Anything else? Seeing none, I adjourn. Move to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.